Hello again, everyone. Varel here, Flow Roofing out of Portland, back for the Flow Show. Hope everyone had a good Easter. Some of the best waves in Oregon I think I've ever surfed this last Easter, and it was only like 3 to 5 foot. It was just so buttery, smooth, glassy in the pocket there at Short Sands. It just was magical, and like everyone around is smiling. Everyone else is like, "Dude, this doesn't even feel like Oregon, right?" And obviously, your fingers are freezing. It's typical Oregon water, but everyone's super stoked. What was cloudy on the forecast was like majority sunny out on the beach, and people are just super stoked. Everyone's grateful. So this video, and bear with me. Ripping on my second cup of coffee at this point, and I want to take a deep dive, an updated ventilation video, not necessarily like a frequently asked question mini-series, but more along the lines of a product review format. So, strong opinions loosely held. I've been trying to maintain an open mind about things ventilation, but I know that there's a lot of consistent inconsistencies that I've seen in the industry. This is, I'm driving around and seeing thousands of roofs at this point, and every day I'm pointing across the street. Neighbors are looking at their neighbor's roof, and they're going, "Well, they got the ridge vent, but they didn't get the intake," or what are those little eyebrow deals there above the gutter, or they got question after question. There's curiosities, and it's understood that these homeowners, these property owners, they are not educating themselves every single day or staying updated on all things roofing, where for myself at least, like this is the dream, right? I want to make sure that my clients get the best information possible, so that way you have the best information to help make yourself decisions in the future, for better or worse, whether you're in a different region and you're just trying to get good information, or if you're local. This is going to be specific to the Pacific Northwest. We don't have a ton of conditioned attic spaces, so this is for all of our non-conditioned attic spaces, but I think it's probably about 98+% non-conditioned attic spaces. So you're going to have an R value of blown insulation, or even some typical fiberglass. There's a small percentage there. We work with a couple GCs that like to do closed cell spray foam. Not a fan of that, and we'll talk a little more about that and what that has for like warranty implications. But this is going to be the ramble of all rambles, right? I don't want to have to talk about attic ventilation again the rest of the year, because I'm having conversations with homeowners every day about trying to make sure that they have the accurate information specific to the architecture of their building. And in Portland, and I'm sure in parts of Seattle, you get the same styles, but there's a lot of these Cape Cods with finished attic spaces, northeast, southeast, and now I've even seen them in parts of Vancouver. Same probable builder, designer, architect was like, "Yeah, let's keep pumping them out," and they got good bones, structurally sound. They've last 100+ years in a lot of cases, but they're dropping our average build year per repair or per replacement down to like the 1930s. 1940s. And so northeast, southeast Portland, you get a bunch of different add-ons through the century of remodels, where people are adding additions, creating sunrooms. They're doing all sorts of funky things, and ventilation, being only established in the 60s, wasn't necessarily the top of mind detail. And for all those that do have some nice soft ventilation, thank you, to help make sure that air's flowing. But what we've seen, a lot of these Cape Cod, we'll talk about it more as it relates to also like new developments, post 80s, 90s, 2000s, because a lot of those builds are not as sound as you would think, right? I think anyone in the construction industry knows that these new builds are just high volume, very race to the bottom, like the GCs, the developers are just going to the bottom of the barrel of everything. And it's not a ideal situation for all the homeowners that are getting into these buildings, because ventilation may be at code, and we'll talk more about what all this looks like, but I don't know if I would buy a newer house. I understand that priorities around school, life, and cost, maintenance, details, overall cost of ownership, also availability, right? Like just the home market is changing, and there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. I don't know what's going to happen with all of the silver tsunami baby boomers retiring by the tens of thousands, I'm sure, every day at this point, and then that transfer of wealth and whatever they have in their portfolio, whether that's passed down or sold, most likely passed down, how that's going to be impacting home affordability, all these things that I don't try to speculate on, because I try to stay in my lane with rich roofs. But it's going to trickle down to us millennials and everyone in between, that it's like, okay, well, we've got $600,000 to $800,000 3-bedroom houses that cost the builders less than $200K to build at scale. Where's the wages that are, going to make sure everyone can afford these things? So, talking from like the perspective of having retired from pizza 7 or 8 years ago, pizza and food, low margin, right? Affordability is like the concern in any business, but food, restaurants, highest potential failure rates, like everyone else, hourly and salary, everyone's concerned about budgets. So we're going to talk about how that even fits into attic ventilation. And I've got about 30% on the battery, got about 10 gigs on the memory. We're going to see how far we can dive in, and just a thorough coverage of all things that I'm having conversations with homeowners on the porch, at the backyard, in the attic space, in the garage, just to make sure that folks are up to speed with the things that I think are most important. And it doesn't matter what I think, but these are what I care about, and I want my clients to understand. First things first, not all attic ventilation components, accessories, are created equal. Okay? I think this is well understood across any product category in any industry. There's a spectrum of product quality. One of my favorite golf balls is like a Wilson staff. It's got the nice dimple. It's got a really low profile dimple mat. It makes it look kind of cool, but it's got a very different type of exterior shell to it that grips the club a little different. You're not going to find that ball be the same as the range balls, right? That are all haggard up and the cheapest possible because people are just whacking at them. They're not going to be the same, and it's currently the Masters is going on, so you're not going to find those sponsored Titleist players rocking even a Wilson staff. They're going to be probably going Pro V1 on everything, but there's probably some Callaway guys too, but I don't know anything about that world. So back to attic ventilation. Back in the 60s, established the minimum attic ventilation code would be 1 to 300, which was the state's standard. And a 1 to 300 code, and we're going to use a 1,500 square foot home for anyone to kind of help make the geometry a little more simple, make sure the numbers work out. 1,500 square foot home, roughly 50 by 30. And that's just the attic space itself. Obviously, you're going to have more square footage in the attic space because of the Pythagorean theorem and how the geometry works. That creates more square footage when you go to create a peak above the traditional 1,500 square foot. And so I taught a little bit of algebra back in the day at Oregon State, and so we're going to keep the numbers easy to understand because I'm not going to draw it out the entire time. And so that 1 to 300 ratio on the 1,500 square foot home at a 1 to 300 means 1,500 divided by 300 means 5 square foot, or roughly you'll see 5 boxes or RVOs or turtle vents at the top of your ridge. And that top of that ridge should be, I think, within about a 2-foot space from the ridge cap, which is about as good as you're going to get for, at the time in the 60s and up till the 2000s roughly, the minimum code standards up until the time when international code standards came about, which is doubling that. And so you could see twice as many boxes for the 1,500 square foot example, and you would expect to see a proportional amount of intake on either side of the ridge, on either side of the eave, to use a traditional ranch style home as the example. And so all these units for these components, these accessories, are measured in what's called NFA. Stands for net free area. That's the volume of air that can flow through the penetration at any given time. And in ventilation world, there's going to be two different flavors of ventilation. There's different accessories in each flavor. One flavor category is called passive ventilation detail. The other is called active, and it's relating to the energy inputs required by the system components themselves. And so passive ventilation accessories do not require an energy input. They work through thermodynamics, pressure, and the active ones are going to require an energy input. Typically going to be like a mechanical device, like a solar attic fan or electric powered attic fan. We're at some of these accessories I want to go over here today, show you how they work a little better in the flesh. And so, we can obviously take you up onto the roof and take a look at these different accessories, but I'm not going to get to talk to you about what they look like before they actually go on the house, and the aspects of when they get installed that are going to be beneficial and what you should look out for in your discernment of which roofer, whatever city region you're in, to determine who to go with. Because the products that I'm going to be showing you are what I believe to be the industry leaders, not just the industry leaders, the number one components for any steep slope attic ventilation considerations. And so much so that I've actually pushed some of their literature over to architects that we work with, because I believe that they should be specifying these components in their builds, so that way we can have the conversation before everything goes to approvals, to make sure that builders are putting the best components on the roof. And they happen to be fairly effective and cost affordable to ensuring that the air is literally flowing through your attic space. So a little bit of an intro there. There's a rhyme and a reason and a purpose why attic ventilation is necessary. You would want to assume that airflow through your attic space in the summertime has temperature considerations. So temperature being the main reason why your load on your HVAC is going to be increased if you don't have good ventilation, or why you might have premature product failure in the asphalt world, because the decking is also getting too hot, one cooked from the top and the bottom at that point. And I think folks from what I've heard, in the upstairs world, that second and third story, if they have an office up there, if they've got a finished attic space, then it's very rare that you'll ever not see impacted insulation helping that air go from the eave all the way up to the ridge. And so, we get probably 1 out of 4 inspection requests are these Cape Cod designs with these little pony walls and these finished attic spaces that have a semi-vault up to a little attic space at the top. And you got these little nooks on either side of your finished attic space, and they look like little triangles if you're looking at the house from a cross section. And we'll dive into helping draw this a little bit, so that way we can all kind of visualize. In my Picasso-like drawing here is going to make some people be like, oh my gosh. But so we have, we'll write office. Some of these better, like obviously bedrooms and everything. So you have, this is hilarious. Okay, check this out. I know. So you have your finished attic space up top, right? These little sections here, very rarely after the pony walls get built up, are going to allow for airflow from the eave all the way up. Very rarely do you ever get any sort of bird blocking here at the soffit level underneath the eaves. And at that point, if it's an old enough house, generally you're going to have like a tongue groove enclosed soffit, so it's never going to enter past the soffit before it has a chance to go up and through the framing detail. But then you go and you finish your attic space, and they're like, oh yeah, let's just keep blocking all this off. Before the 60s, right? So these finished attic spaces typically are going to have both framing and insulation blocking right at the joints where the pony walls meet the framing detail. And so that is probably the biggest, most common issue that I think a lot of homeowners have questions about that we've talked to, because they want a solution, right? They're like, it's too hot upstairs. We need to solve this problem. So at that point, we break up the building. We're talking about compartmentalizing each of those different little sections to create true functionality. We don't want to just throw shit at the wall and hope it sticks. And I think what I've seen is, in the industry, roofers kind of turn a blind eye to creating true functionality, at least in the ventilation space. Obviously we're responsible for making sure a roof leaks, but it's neglect almost at the same level, I believe, when ventilation isn't done properly. Because at that point, they could be charging an individual for said ventilation components, but if they don't actually, one, ever go into the building, know the bones of the structure, or actually know how the true air needs to flow, they're just ripping people off. They're screwing people. Maybe they're not even realizing it, right? So you got these private equity backed firms out there, or you've got these other local brands that are trying to give you these quick quotes, right? Click here and find out what your roof price is. No inspection needed, right? Biggest red flag. I get the point. Why? Like, to speed up the process. Cool. It's maybe good for real estate transactions, right? But every building needs to have an in-person inspection. Doesn't matter the age of the building. If you want to get the true roofing experience, you need to have a professional go up there, take a peek in the attic space, see what's going on, so that way their production, with pictures, their production department can go ahead and build that thing properly. So for everyone that gets a max flow system, we call a max flow system optimization for a building. It is truly maximizing how much air can flow. So we call it a max flow system. It's kind of on brand, I guess, too. But the idea is that you may not, in every case, be able to reach optimization, but you can definitely make significant improvements to create true functionality. And you have to educate the homeowners, property owners around what these may have implications for in terms of an aesthetic. So when you do these ventilation details, you're going to increase the number of penetrations in the roof. And that has curb appeal, which for some folks, curb appeal is the top priority. I want this roof to make my building look sexy as hell, right? Understood. Get the mission. You need to understand the implications of forgoing this by the book required, NRCA manufacturer guideline required, building code established, FHA standards of ventilation. What that means if you forgo that. First off, we're going to have a conversation on what that means in terms of your product lifespan. You're going to, and this is the same case for some of our builders that do that closed cell ventilation detail, that closed cell insulation between the trusses. They are not addressing ventilation detail. Actually, in closed cell situations, they are completely omitting any odds that any air is going to flow whatsoever. In a metal roof situation, you can do a little bit of above decking lateral movement, but you're not going to assume that you're going to get any sort of interior attic airflow whatsoever. So this is just the beginning, you guys. We're just getting started here. This is the warm-up, okay? So when it comes to creating the true functional lifespan of the attic airflow in some of these old Cape Cod designs that have these finished attic spaces, you're compartmentalizing these little triangles so that they can breathe independently of each other and or the attic space above the finished area. And at that point, you have to consider that because you're creating the functionality in a section of the roof, that section is going to have increased penetration counts, which it's our responsibility to guarantee be leak-free. But the idea is that your sexy farmhouse looking all white cottage vibe with your picket fence is going to have penetrations, holes, accessories coming through the roof where otherwise it may have been nice and clear. Now, talk to some people, they're like, don't give me that, right? Don't give me your max flow system. I want to make sure that I get the curb appeal effect, and I have to have the conversation I have with the builders that do the closed cell detail. So stick with me. in your manufacturer's warranty reads the fine print that states the ventilation detail, at least in the residential warranties. I'm sure it's the same with commercial, but the ventilation detail has to be at a minimum code for them to go and honor your warranty. And so one of the questions I'm asking my property people is like, how long do you plan on being in the property? Because that's going to determine whether or not I'm going to suggest that you should consider a mid-grade or better product, or if you should look at something a little more lower tiered, cost effective. We call it an economy option. At that point, then I can make recommendations as to what you should consider based on what you currently have. What you currently have, we call Flow legacy ventilation. It is what's been there before any roof work was done, what we're seeing when we get on site for the roof inspection. So your legacy ventilation detail is going to determine how much we have to add and where and why and what quantities of. And so keep in mind too, at this point, like I have created an office within your attic space. And so I try, when we get there, put on my shades. It's, for me, I go into x-ray mode when I'm going into your property and you're like, why isn't he looking at me in the eye? I'm looking into your roof. I'm looking and say, okay, cool. What are the odds? Like, I've seen this architecture before, pass this down to my inspectors. We put on our x-ray vision and we want to make sure that we can combine that with the actual interior attic inspection. So then we can have accurate diagnoses of the prescription necessary to make sure that we're giving people accurate functional solutions versus trying to listen to both what people want, but then they're holding the bag. And so this is a very tangential way of saying that if you plan on being in the building for over 10 years or more, ventilation is going to be one of the single biggest ROI factors in what allows you to have a longer lasting shingle life, better building efficiency from an HVAC standpoint for the summer and heating and cooling, right? Better humidity control in the wintertime as you have this humidity air. Like when you believe humid air is going to contain moisture, right? So when you go to South Florida or Indonesia or something where it's like, you immediately start sweating, it's actually the moisture that's in the air because one, I think it rains, I don't know, what are the weather people's called? But it rains so much and it's at such a high temperature that there's constant evaporation of all the precipitation and it just gets into the air and it's sticky, right? Maybe I'm mistaken on that, but high humidity is also, I believe, higher in proportionality to the moisture content. So you breathe onto some glass and you'll see condensation on the glass, right? That is the humidity of your air in your lungs exhausting onto the glass and condensing on a cooler surface. Same exact principle happens in the wintertime in your attic space. So as the pups breathing, the showers, and the cooking evaporate and go up, they leach through the penetrations in your ceiling, through the drywall, through the lights, sockets. You go up into the attic space and through your insulation, and eventually, in the worst case, that you have an under-ventilated attic will condensate on your decking type, your sheathing, your plywood. And in those cases, if it's not properly ventilated, you could have significant organic growth. Disclaimer, Flow and our Max Flow systems, forever and always since the beginning, have never made claims to have an abatement effect or intention to abate organic growth around components that would otherwise create better airflow conditions. And so another way of saying that is that we don't guarantee that organic growth is going to be removed because we've increased or optimized your attic ventilation detail. Now, I will say that we do all understand the conditions in which organic growth likes to grow and proliferate. And so you can reduce the conditions that the organic growth likes to develop in by addressing ventilation properly so that it doesn't condensate on surfaces, that allows it to exhaust properly in the wintertime and the summertime. So you break it down like that and people, they tend to, a light bulb goes off and they kind of understand too. You have to be abatement certified. You have to be mold organic. You have to be lead / organic growth and or asbestos abatement certified. There are abatement specific or those toxins specific companies that they go and they remove that stuff. And so we are not in that field of construction. So completely separate trade, completely separate industry. Don't think I'll be getting into it anytime soon with the amount of asbestos I know that exists out in the world with construction. So that being said, so temperature in the summer, humidity and moisture in the winter. These are the reasons why attic ventilation are important. So now, not all accessories are created equal. This is the same reason why a Toyota Prius is not going to be the same as a Corvette, or a Corvette is not going to be the same as any of your other exotics, correct, right? And the same reason why you wouldn't want to haul a boat with your Prius and why you need to get a pickup, okay? So for all these different reasons, there's a purpose and a reason why a component is better than another, right? And a Prius versus a truck is not a fair example, right? But for attic ventilation detail, there is so many similarities in products that claim to have the same NFA value, but in reality, their true functional differences can mean a doubling or a halving of actual true airflow. And so I've seen this with my own eyes. I've been to the other side. And with that, we're going to share with you guys our preferred products here in a minute. So, again, active, requiring energy input, whether it be a solar unit or like a wired, third-party wired situation. Some of them, the ones we install, even have just simple plugs. 20-foot cord, you go ahead and plug that in wherever you get a chance. You can run an extension cord up to your garage, doesn't matter. So the nice aspect of some of these components are that, one, there's extremely well-documented installation guidelines, right? So we know exactly how to install it. There's no guesswork. A lot of these other components, they don't even have submittal details around letting you know what anyone who needs to understand or document in a more higher level commercial setting what is being installed and why and how it should be properly installed as a process to limiting liability for all parties involved, to both then guarantee certainty that the system is actually going to work the way the manufacturer requires it. Okay, so we install on the passive side of things almost exclusively Lamenco. And so combined with the Malarkey system, Malarkey is one of the only manufacturers, maybe another one I don't know about, maybe Atlas or something is not here local in the Pacific Northwest, but Malarkey is the number one shingle in the world, period. Made in Portland, started in Portland, designed and over-engineered to be the longest lasting product, the most sustainable product I've ever seen, and the longest lasting is assuming that you do the ventilation components properly. So you can forego your ventilation if you signed off on it and understand that you're going to have a reduced lifespan of your actual shingle. But know that Malarkey from the beginning started in the 50s, had to come in, a bunch of these big dogs already been roaming around for decades, having completely overwhelmed the market with what they thought was the best product. And, you know, for the most part, maybe that's true up until the point when Malarkey came to the show. So, having modified their asphalt with plastics and rubber out of landfills, creating more UV resistance, better granule retention being the single biggest reason why a shingle lasts longer. And then you sprinkle in some 3M magic into the granules, and you got a recipe for success. And so Malarkey's been the most popular product. We never get the call for anyone asking anything for anything other than Malarkey. And for the folks that are like, oh yeah, can you do GAF owns corning certainty? I'm like, well, do you have an HOA requiring you to do that? Like, why? What makes you think that those products are better than anyone else that's been designed locally for the region? And, you know, so coming from being a doughboy, I gotta understand that people, when they go out to get a fresh croissant at one of the local bakeries like Jinju here up in Northeast, I think more recently awarded like a James Beard Award for like best bakery in Oregon or something, had consistently pumping out top quality pastries. Guess what? Those pastries don't sit. They're made fresh every morning, right? They're buttery, they're crispy, they're artisanal. You don't want your shingles to be old, stale, mass-produced, crispy. Ugh. You want it to be light, flaky, and fresh. Okay, that's the Malarkey shingle versus anyone else. So, and it's not been confirmed. This is my hypothesis, but I think the biggest manufacturers in the country, they mass produce these products at a scale that accommodate for an industry that we don't have here in the Northwest, which is the storm industry, which is the damages at scale because of hurricanes, hail, wind, whatever the thing is that we don't get here in the Northwest for the most part. So that's an entire different industry, and so these manufacturers be sharing product and they'd be pumping stuff out, shipping it all over left and right. You don't know if that lot number had been sitting for years or not. Whereas with the Malarkey product, it's been freshly made specifically for the Pacific Northwest. So I don't know why anyone would consider anything else living here in the Northwest, unless they don't like the colors or the style that Malarkey does. Malarkey does have a consistent pattern for like a salt and pepper effect in the shingle. So when you're looking up at it, it kind of looks like it's not a consistent color grade. So it's got different colors within the color that they state. So, so we would have almost left out a pretty important aspect as well. So in California, Title 24 is a standard for new construction that requires a minimum what's called SRI index. SRI standing for Solar Reflective Index. And you can offset a lot of the solar gain by implementing an SRI conscious product. And there's actually a full separate line of products. Malarkey has one, I believe it's called Eco-Asis, which is pretty close to our Flow-Asis slogan. So the Eco-Asis line in California is, and other manufacturers have this similar solar rated product. What it's trying to get at is appeasing both the California Title 24, but also ultimately achieving a minimum SRI index. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's proportional to, and simplifying it, is basically the lighter the shingle, the more reflective that product, which means that you're going to have less solar gain, less heat gain, and at that point, you can offset or help reduce the temperatures and the building efficiency by going with a lighter colored product. I don't understand why there's still black roofs out there. I feel like if we had a more of a Swiss or a even German or Netherlands, these higher, even maybe, I don't know, these European countries outside of anything else in the world, their engineering standards, which are also, I believe, a reflection of maybe some of their medical/food standards, are top notch, right? So you can argue with that. I'm not here to argue about anything with European stuff. I'm not a European guy, so I can't speak to a lot of that. But I do understand that they have some of the highest standards. I met an engineering gal, and I said, hey, can describe to me the functionality of why clouds exist? And she went off on an amazing and a beautiful description of all the different gases and the pressures and everything else. But what else? So passive versus active, SRI index proportional to the color. So the darker the product, the more absorption it has, right? Try wearing a black shirt in summer, you'd be sweating. So yeah, why we have black roofs in this day and age, I don't know. There is a completely different industry in a different video we'll talk about for restoration and what the actual efficiencies look like for coatings and or layovers, and what that does when you take a like potentially a mod bit roof or an ungrade or like an EDPM black system, and then you transform it, right? There's building efficiency gains that are undeniable when you go to a white roof. So product time. Okay, so we've gone through passive and active. We're going to show you some products that we like the best in each category, okay? All right, show and tell time. Okay, so these accessories come in 4-foot sticks, and I believe it's mostly because of shipping and freight, and 4-foot sticks is a very good size for palletization, I believe. So we got a Lamenco product here. You can see the brand. And this is not your average ridge vent, okay? It's kind of funny, my face. I'll just stick it up. First off, it has a ridge limitation for the slope of the roof, so it wraps over each side. And we're going to talk about the difference between this product versus a standard corrugated ridge vent, which I think is probably the biggest POS out there on the industry. And then you're going to get these different market leaders that are literally just what's called white labeling their product, and then they're putting it in your roofing manufacturer's box and shipping it out, and they're claiming that that's the best product. And so I've seen these other accessories on like different like specs, and I'm like, God, why don't they just stick to Laminco? They don't know. So we're doing our part to try to get the industry to switch here in the Northwest. It's going to be a slow process. It takes a long time to steer a big boat, but I think we having these conversations, we can help make sure we can have an impact for better or worse. So corrugated plastic louvered ridge vents are complete garbage and usually have like a styrofoam-like filter on the inside. And some of these rigid plastic ones also have that styrofoam-like filter. So filters require what? They got to be changed. They require maintenance, okay? And so with that, you are and eventually can literally start suffocating your attic space over time. You don't want that, okay? And so the true functionality of those products is very low, especially going down over time. We'll talk a little more about that as it relates to solar in a different video, but I'm not pro solar by any means. But so this product here as well, you can tell it's kind of big, right? It's not just the video, it's like wide, right? So the corrugated plastic options are typically about 8-inch to maybe 10 inches wide. And I talked to a couple different customers over the years, and they were like, I don't know about the ridge vent. It's kind of a newer product. I like the tried and true stuff. I want peace of mind in my system. I go, well, keep in mind my workmanship warranty is guaranteeing that this roof's never going to leak for a minimum of 10 years. And you should understand that the products I'm installing on your building are vetted, tried and true for the reasons that I believe are best for you. And I'm not trying to rhyme there or anything. It's just, I'm shocked. I mean, it's like 1 in 50 people are like anti-new accessories, but for the most part, everyone else is like, hey, give me the best. I want the upgrade. I want to know what it's like to feel the efficiency of that max flow system, right? And so we don't make any temperature claims, but I've heard great comments. We got some good reviews from people that are like, yeah, upstairs is way better now. So manufacturers claim a solid 20 plus degree reduction in the attic temperatures. And you can boost that. You can literally boost that with a better product, or you can boost that with a mechanical device. So something that's a little more active in the penetration style. So Laminco here, we talked about the diameter of those other products. And so even the industry leaders, like there's one that I'm not going to name, but it has the number 2 in the name. Okay. That's all I'll say. They go around, they've done all the private labeling for these other manufacturers. They're claimed to be the industry leader, right? They do these conferences, they try to educate people to basically move more of their product. While Laminco, I believe, has the highest spec and the best standards on the install side of things, which is most important. But for other aspects in their intake as well that we'll talk about after this ridge vent system, I want to explain why Laminco is at the top. So any general comparable market leading product is going to be about an 18 NFA per foot rating. So at a 4-foot stick, was it 56 NFA? 54, 56. And so you do 100 feet of this, right? You're going to have 100 feet times 1800 NFA, basically, which is a huge number, right? And for most people, they don't have 100 feet of ridge on their house. And if they did, then generally it's going to be at a different level, and you have to make considerations around what's called short circuiting, because there's an effect where the ridge vent works so well, this ridge vent works so well that it can pull air from other exhaust components if it's not installed at the proper level. The literal height of the component matters, not just geographically, and the architecture of the building as well. So you have to take all this into consideration when you're creating a ventilation plan for your homeowner. You're taking into account what they want and they care about, what they think is important is most number one. Number two is what's truly functional, right? And to install the best product possible, you need to understand the benefits and how it works in the first place. So breaking it down here, I know everyone's sitting on the edge of their seat right now. This is riveting stuff here, but one component, one aspect, one detail of this that you don't get in the corrugated vent. You see that little louver there, and that's not exactly exclusive to Lamenco. Other market-leading products have this same design accessory, okay? That little wing right there creates a negative pressure system behind it in the louvered system right here. So as wind's wafting over on either side of your ridge, it's creating that negative pressure little wind pocket right there, okay? As it goes over, it's pulling air out of the ridge vent, okay? And I mean, it's a beautiful effect. It's called the Bernoulli equation. It's the same reason as to why planes fly, because the air travels faster over the top of the wing, creating the negative pressure at the front of the wing that helps lift the bottom of the wing, right? And that's why we all fly. So you got Bernoulli's equation on top of your roof if it's got this component, this little wing here. So this baffling effect helps create the negative pressure system. And keep in mind, it's still passive, right? There's no energy inputs here. This is just all design of the accessory itself. So then you got a bunch of other aspects too that are meaningful, well, noteworthy on this louvered edge. And so you've got these holes, these channels as well, to let water flow down so that debris doesn't get through. You've got the louvers up top that are small enough to prevent leaves and twigs from sticking in. In the Northwest, people have concerns about pine needles specifically, which is totally reasonable. Is part of your roof maintenance that you should probably consider looking at blowing out your ridge vents from time to time. And a well-designed ridge vent that has this louver, no matter what, is going to catch debris. People are like all up in arms about why their gutters and their gutter guards are requiring maintenance, is because they catch everything that falls off your roof. So if you create these diverters here, they're naturally just going to fill up with debris. Okay, you don't want to block this louvered area. This is where the air exhausts out of it, leaves literally. So it moves and it flows up and out, gets out of there. So what else? So we talked about the size, right? She's kind of bulky. It's rather large. So we told you that the standard ridge vent is about 8 to 10 inches. And I think that if there's ever been fear around the product that's being installed not working, it, I believe, stems from using cheap products that are not wide enough, one, and truly not functional in their design. But the width matters. Lamenco here utilizes a full 12 inches. 12 inches, okay? So we special order our Malarkey hip and ridge cap because they don't just willy-nilly make a 12-inch. They have 12-inch in stock, right? But we have to order it in, so that actually works. The 12 inches gives you extra coverage at the top of your ridge, right? Look at this. We're in it together now. So you're in your ridge, and you have your air flowing up and in. There's some other components. Remember we talked about those cheap ones having like the really shitty styrofoam filter, okay? Well, how do you protect the bugs and the things from crawling in, right? This thing will keep an ant out of here. It's not going to clog because it's not a micro mesh. It's not like it is a micro mesh. It's kind of like the same stuff on your screen door, okay? But it's kind of heat welded to the bottom of the top of the ridge vent underneath, so that it blocks anything as air comes up and in. And it's got these other little winged louvers here. These help create the swirling effect that prevents water from intruding. So wind-driven rain in a poorly designed ridge vent is a valid concern, no doubt about it. But goodness, you start a conversation around why the Lamenco whoops compared to any other product, we won't install anything else. Well, like we're talking to, and so Malarkey is, I would say, way more understanding. Their engineers are like top notch. Their research and development, obviously being a wholesome product, which we've bought into, is just the best. And so wind protection with the louver, as well as these little Z baffles here, prevents water from intruding into your building. It's not all about bug sticks and stuff. Water intrusion is the single biggest concern of anyone regarding the roofing components that are going to their roof. So it's got the size. It's got the functional wing. It's got the properly sized mesh. It's got the wind protection. It's got the added benefit of true. And so I was down at the IRE, the Roofing Expo down in Vegas years ago. Haven't been in a while, but I went up to the Lamenco guys. I'm like, show me what you got. And they put this bad boy on their little smokehouse demo, which eventually I'd like to build and show you guys in-house here, like the true like reality of how well this product design works. But I've seen it and I believe it and I feel it, that this product kills, and it kills me that anyone else would sell any other product whatsoever. But everyone's got their own opinions. So that being said, it also has got these nice little channels for exactly like these guides for exactly where to put the fasteners. There's no guesswork in it, right? And so it's part of a 110 or a 130 rated wind system, and that's your ridge vent. So passive ventilation detail that is very much, I believe, to be the bee's knees in all things ridge vent related. So what about the intake? So also by Lamenco, okay? We're gonna go over this here. All right, now, you thought the ridge vent was impressive. Take a look at this. So you have here what's called a smart shingle over intake vent. Smart shingle over intake vent. You've heard it some people call it the eyebrow sitting on the roof line, and different manufacturers have different guidelines as to where to install these. There's some in a closed soffit situation that can be defined as a eave vent when you install it right at the eave, which is not my recommendation, especially somewhere here in the Northwest where we're in the valley. We don't get a lot of ice damming. I get it that you can create the functionality at the eave, but then you have to also have a conversation about internal baffling. And if you're going to baffle between your ridges, your rafters, then you have to make sure that you're creating functionality in where you install it. So smart shingle over intake can also be installed further up the roof line, further from the eave. I generally, as a guideline on the work orders, have a minimum and a standard about 8 courses up. 4 courses, no. 50-50, you're going to have an issue with blockage. 6 courses, what if they go and do like an R30 plus blow-in remodel, right? So then if they're not baffling it, right, and or the insulation guys don't properly create that barrier for air to flow up and in, you're not going to truly get the benefits of that sexy max flow system when you went and ruined it with your blow-in, right? But what if you already have the blow-in, right? Then you need to make sure that your intake is actually functioning. So you want that airflow to get up and in. So there are details, and the engineers at Lamenco just well done. Seriously. We won't install anything else. At this point, Lamenco is the best I've ever seen for passive. Okay? Well, we're going to talk about active active ventilation after this. Okay? So we're talking about passive. So also, girthy product, very nice and rigid. I can stand on this; it's not going to break. It's got the the interior like channels to making sure that it's what I believe is called snow load rated, right? So it's not going to depress or get sunken down because you have 2 feet of snow at the top of it. There's a bunch of accessories not on this intake that are missing that we can go over as to, and I'll draw them, I guess, would be the best way to do it. But to making sure this product's actually properly installed. So manufacturers' guidelines and specifications would state that you then have a series of layered components on top of this to making sure that water is properly draining and that's not going to go wicking back and up and in where you cut the intake. So first off, biggest benefit that I like, the overall profile of the front of this product. So what you actually see, wipe it off there, what you actually see from the ground, you see that? It's got that little louver. Biggest benefit, and it's actually offset a little bit, so that way it sits there on the roof. You have like a 1/4 inch underneath too. Why does that matter though, right? So first off, that's your exit for the intake, right? But the biggest benefit as to why I like it, that prevents wind-driven rain from entering in through your intake, okay? Which is a huge risk for the people out on the coast, for anyone that's in a maybe the gorge situation, right? Or even just concerned about wind at all, okay? So that louver there, creating the weather protection necessary. And guess what? It's got a second louver. This isn't no infomercial. I'm not Mike Rowe on late night here. This is just letting you know Lemanco's thought of it all, okay? And so true functionality. And this component, this accessory, Lemanco's intake, actually works when placed properly and installed properly as an exhaust. And so let's draw it out now. In a situation where you have a roof to wall section and a second roof coming up because you got 2-story, right? Or you got a garage situation, or maybe for whatever reason this is a live-in space. So technically, manufacturers define what's required to ventilate, the differentiating between what's a live-in space or a non-live-in space. And this is where you'll see a lot of roofers cut corners, is they will not ventilate properly your garage, your attached garage, okay? All right, final bit of coffee, we're going for it. So I believe, this is Flo's opinion, and you are entitled to whatever opinion you might have. I completely understand. Or any other company that has their opinions, right? I'm not here to change anyone's minds. I'm here to let you know this is how we flow. Garage, anything with a roof deserves to be ventilated. Even though it's in the code that, it's not a living space and you don't have to do it, or manufacturers exclude it, right? If it's got shingles and it's cooking from the inside, my garage doesn't have any attic space, it's open, right? Doesn't your garage get warm in the summer? Yeah, it does, because it doesn't have proper ventilation detail. So just because you got an open space underneath your garage and it's attached to your house doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to act differently than if it was in an attic space. Hot air is going to rise. You need to exhaust the hot air and help cool the shingle from both sides. Combine a lighter shingle. Give it better ventilation on the inside, get a longer lasting shingle lifespan, okay? For the folks that are planning on being in the house for multiple decades or putting in their portfolio, not having to want to buy a roof in 20 years, but trying to get 30 out of that bad boy, you want to ventilate it properly. So the total cost of ownership is a metric that in the commercial space is an education tool to help giving property owners, managers, decision-making board members, whatever you have at the table, to let them understand that you can reduce the total cost of ownership by doing the things that you don't want to do up front, by maybe spending a little more or doing what's called preventative maintenance. And so what we can do here in the ventilation side of things is prevent premature product failure by increasing building efficiency by giving you better airflow on the interior. Okay, so this roof to wall section here has a typical piece of flashing called roof to wall. It's pretty obvious, right? But here we go. Another Picasso drawing here. So you've got the roof to wall flashing that's laying on this bottom section here. And this is not probably nearly as emphasized in the size of this area. But if it's a significant amount of roofing, this is not drawn to proportion, but if you want to ventilate this area, you can add the Lemanco intake down low, right? Hopefully you can see what the R value is so that you can install it properly. It's not going to create blockage. But if you need to also add exhaust and you don't want to have those really snazzy looking turtle box vents right in front of your front door, you can add a second course of the Lemanco intake at the roof to wall transition and you're exhausting properly, okay? So that is one of the added benefits the Lemanco is exclusive to. I imagine you can have other products that do something similar, but Lemanco knows this and knew this from the beginning, which is the reason why I believe that this is a superior product, because they thought of it all right in the beginning, right? So second added detail. Look again at this very lovely, not too tight, but very functional filter. Okay, so no birds and debris or no bugs are going to be getting up in there. You don't actually make the cut at the very back. That's what a lot of people think, right? But you would actually be reducing the NFA flow if you went to the tapered, very shallow little end here behind that. So this is all just built for support to make sure that there's a nice smooth transition from the normal roof pitch onto this louver, okay? So the airflow is actually cut back behind that support up here, further on the roof line, okay? And so it's closer to about 8 inches. See that? Behind the actual opening. So I can't back this up far enough. It's about 8 inches between that section right there, okay? And so then you combine that with having like a ring shanked fastener at that point too, and you're going to have added wind protection. So load rating is one of the bigger concerns for ventilation components that I install, and that's not necessarily the concern, because I know there's products that GAF installs that are like a weaved mesh, and they can compress, they actually wave a little bit, and it's not exclusive to just GAF, but there's other manufacturers too that use it, and it's not a very long-lasting product, let alone it doesn't have all the components that add for different types of protection from wind-driven rain elements and all these different things that I think are pretty important in Oregon. So, and all of Washington as well, basically neighbors. So, all right, so then we're going to talk about how to install the component with different aspects, like a cross-section and a specification. So you got the roof line here. Let's just say we're going to draw it. This is real time enough. Forgive me, I wasn't prepared. 8 courses minimum. And you would do the true measurement, but find 8 courses is like the perfect point at which then you create your, let's just call it cut right here, and then you've got your intakes added. I wish I would have had a eel. All right, here we go. So intake here. This is how we install our ventilation, and it's probably one of the most overlooked details. And in any roof transition, slope transition, you're supposed to add additional ice and water at that transition. So if you got a steeper slope, maybe a 10-12 and it drops to a 6-12, that joint where the slopes transition, extra ice and water detail right there, okay? Yes, the shingle is not going to leak, but it's there just for what's potentially going to create an issue in the future. It could be an ice dam, right? So you have an extra layer here, and then you have an extra accessory here, okay? And then you have your underlayments going on right there. So at this point, we've got ice and water, and then you have your starter, and then you have your extra shingle layers. Okay. Oh, I am very this must be all the caffeine. My hands are shaking. So shingle over smart intake. Okay. Keep in mind, you're only adding what you need, and what you're looking at is when you're looking up at your bird blocking, this again call your legacy intake. When you're looking up at it could be circles, rectangles, triangles, it could be ovals, I don't know. But that is your legacy intake. And sometimes they get painted over so they're not truly functional. You want functionality in your airflow, your ventilation detail, okay? So this example, and oh my goodness, I hope it's not backwards. I can't tell. But you can look at the picture. So underneath here, and it's not even shown properly. So you have additional ventilation components, and you have your underlayment as well. It's very hard to see in my damn pen is being squiggly. Okay, so you have multiple layers here, okay? And pay attention to this, because this is where intake ventilation manufacturers and roofers completely go off the rails. This is the most important aspect of how to install your intakes functionally so they don't leak anytime in the near future. And basically try to see if we can't fold this in a way that lets me kind of guide us from above here. So you got your eave, okay? We're going 8 courses back, and that allows the intake to be cut at a level that may get over any sort of blown insulation that may be in the one potentially blown in the soffit or in the attic space itself, okay? So if you had, like, this is your warm wall, so to speak, then you'd want to get that intake up potentially even more than 8 courses so that the insulation's not blocking that airflow coming in, okay? So on your bottom layer, you're laying down ice and water detail, ice and water. And that's your resealable underlayment that goes over the decking, and then you cut your line in. And what that does is it allows any fastener that goes through it to prevent any water from hitting your decking, okay? And in an ideal world too, what you find on most specifications at the highest level in commercial, you'll have 2 courses of ice and water installed. And this is also part of like the Emerald Premium warranty or some of the GAF Master Elite warranty. It's the highest warranty requirements require 2 courses or 18 inches past the warm wall. I think maybe 18 to 24, right? So then you have 2 courses of ice and water all the way up the decking to prevent ice dams, okay? You wouldn't see synthetic over the top of that unless your installer was going above and beyond for you, okay? But then you have your vent, your little triangle intake vent. You got your cut on the backside there, okay? I didn't really place it in the middle like it should have been. But you got your air coming in through your vent right there, okay? So on top of that should be another course of ice and water, really. And that peel and stick membrane sticks onto the top of that ventilation component. And why would you do that? Because you're about to shoot nails with all these other products through your accessory, through the ventilation detail, okay? So because this is actually a new roof line, so you have your roof line here at the eave where the gutter sits, and then draw the gutter. But you have another roof line that starts where the shingle over smart intake starts. And you can go and check this on your house if you have it right now. You can actually ask your contractor if he has pictures to install it this way. If he didn't install it this way, you may have yourself issues in the future, but you also may have a voided claim. There could definitely be workmanship related issues that pop up later because that's a missing component. So you should have this little tiny strip here above your ice and water layer. And this is not me just making this up, okay? This is manufacturer's guidelines and everything. I'm just telling you what's in the install manual. You have the starter strip. Because it's a new start to the roof line, this starter strip helps prevent wind uplift from damaging your shingles, okay? Now, I believe there should be an extra layer of synthetic that runs over the ice and water, over the starter, okay, before it gets to the shingle. But if you just go ice and water over and it's already resealable and it's under the starter, it's might as well be bulletproof anyway. But synthetic can be an extra add-on there too. That would go be a kind of maybe what do they call, fortified system? I don't even know if fortified has that detail in there. But you have your starter strip that prevents the shingles up above. These are the shingles. They're tiled accordingly with my nice art to prevent wind from blowing those shingles up. So if you're at the coast and you're like, oh, got 80-mile-an-hour winds coming, these shingles down below here have that same starter strip if it was installed correctly to manufacturer guidelines, NRCA guidelines. But you also have starter strip at that smart shingle over intake when it's installed correctly, okay? So if it's a new start to the roof, you have starter strip. That acts like the zipper around the entire system that gives it that wind uplift rating that people see on the packaging at 110 or 130 miles an hour, and is a matching component to the manufacturer, especially if you're going for these 50-year warranties by the manufacturer. So you can void a manufacturer's warranty by not doing the ventilation right. You can also void a manufacturer's warranty, one, if you don't install it correctly, poor workmanship or not following guidelines. You can install it correctly if you're not using matching components or enough of the components as well. So enough being the quantity of the different types. You got shingle starter, hip and ridge cap, ice and water detail, synthetic underlayments, and I know there's at least one more. And so at that point, you know, the 50-year number in reality for everyone's warranty is only in the interest of the manufacturers to sell more product. The 50-year number is a statistic roll of the dice that manufacturers understood. One person jumped on board, would have been one of the older market leaders, I'm sure, who started saying, we can sell more components if we give people a better warranty. Let's do a 50-year. But wait, home ownership average on turnover on average is 10 to 12 years. Regionally, it probably changes, I'm sure, but we'll never have to honor these 50-year warranties. They're sitting at the boardroom going, these silly homeowners, which is, it's a completely different warranty over on the commercial side. You want to look at what the true product lifespan is of any shingle product. Look to the commercial warranty, the exact same product you're installing. You'll see the true lifespan of that product. 30 to 40 years, pro rates after 20, okay? On average. Any roof after 20 years is going to age. Even if you do better ventilation detail, it's going to age, okay? Under natural circumstances, at that point, you're there saying, I got my forever house and I got a 50-year warranty. Yes, that 50-year warranty will be valid in 50 years if you're around for 50 years, and that's part of what you wanted was a lifetime's worth of efficiency and product lifespan. And now Malarkey and some of these other manufacturers, but Malarkey specifically offers a non-prorated 50-year warranty on the Emerald Pro package. And that Pro package states that you need a minimum of, I believe, 4 matching accessories that are not the shingles. So you have the shingles, 1. Then you have 4 others. You have the starter strip, you have the ice and water detail, you have the hip and ridge cap product, and I believe that's the 4. Where there's some tolerance, which is nice, and the reason why we use Malarkey is that we can then bring in our own ASTM-rated, high-quality BEM roofing insights, beautiful black and orange beaver logoed synthetic. And it's cap nailed to make sure that's up good, better for wind resistance. And so, and also just lets us know like that's a flow roof right there because it's got the flow logo on it in black and orange, beaver black and orange, right? So, what else? We got passive intake taken care of. So a lot, and okay, finishing touches. We got the underlayments. Everything's been cut to size. You know you got the best product, but what else makes it snazzier? Okay, look at these little diagonal triangles here. You see those little lines? Those actually mean something. Those represent what you're supposed to do to help taper those intakes. So you're here at the edge of your intake. You're like, okay, cool. What a lot of guys will do is just boop, drop your shingles, your underlayments down. Boop. And that creates a little pocket right here of hollowed out opening for a bee's nest or wind-driven rain or debris to clog up into. And some people will try to like wrap the ice and water down the edge there and then shoot it over. No. Lamenco has these guided lines. You see that little triangle right there? Those guidelines are there so that you can take the tapered end of the factory part and link it up. So you can imagine turning this triangle out, okay? Or this triangle gets turned out. So this corner here drops one, lines up with the end of the factory front piece, and then helps taper down. And so it costs more material. It takes more labor. Wow, I don't want to do that, right? Oh, more expensive. But it reduces the wind uplift at another roof line you're creating in the roof itself. So no other manufacturer that I've seen has that triangular guideline aspect of creating the taper at the end of the shingle itself. Of the intake. Okay? And so thoughtful is Lamenco that I've unable to find a comparable product that I believe is best suited for my clients. And so this is all the different details that have gone into what I believe makes us create better systems from the inside out. Roofing, for 95% plus of the industry, is a top-down trade. It's what you see is what you get. And I believe that's fundamentally incorrect. It's in the code. Every steep slope building needs it to consider, whether it's cathedral ceilings or vaults, which we didn't really talk about too much, but even that has some airflow needs, or even clear story options too, which require that as well. We talked a little bit about the roof to wall details in the drawing, but to create true functional lifespan is our mission, to maximize ventilation components for a building's needs based on its specific architecture. I don't believe there's too many roofs that are exactly the same. Obviously there are, but like, you don't want to take that approach. You want to give people a customized solution to make sure that they have peace of mind specific to their building, okay, with whatever it is that they value the most, which is a long-lasting roof, their own budgets, their families, their building efficiencies, all those different aspects. So that was passive ventilation. We're not done yet. Okay, ready? So hold on to your buttons. This is going to require a little bit of a move. Product review, transitioning to active, oh no, ventilation components. Okay. Ta-da. Okay, so featuring the Quiet Cool, okay? This is not a product specific or exclusive to Flow, but Quiet Cool has recognized Flow as a certified Quiet Cool installer, which is nice. And so we had done extensive research into trying to find what mechanical device did people really want. And Quiet Cool came out of the woodworks and offers a 15-year warranty, made in the USA, designed, not overseas built. It's made, it says right on the box there. It says it right on the box. Right there. Made in the USA, okay? So, I know it's kind of a cheesy demo. We could probably do it on the roof better. But it's nice, you can see actually everything that's on the box that you'd get. This system will clear an attic space multiple times over in an hour. So what's nice about this component, you can see a little cell phone on the box here. It's app controlled, which is beautiful for the snowbirds out there, okay? And at that point, you can control the humidity standards based on maybe the building's use cases. So if you got a family that loves cooking every single meal, you're going to have more of the humidity details evaporating through, unless you've done significant air sealing when you do your blow-in remodel, but that's a completely different detail. So the use, though, the electrical use of this component is very low, and no one wants a hum or vibration in their attic space. They want true functionality that's smooth flowing. They want the Quiet Cool, right? Now I'm starting to sound like a damn infomercial here. So what you find is the real functional benefit of this product lies in the plug-and-play design. This product has a 20-foot cord that you can run an extension cord into your attic space, or have a prefabricated, if you already have a plug in the attic space, 110 design that makes it easy in America to be able to go through and just punch it into and then start to benefit from the aspects that come from a Quiet Cool design. So if you're a snowbird, you can turn that humidity up in the wintertime, or you can lower the temperature that it kicks on to help increase building efficiency so that your HVAC is not working as hard. So you have a fan up top, and it's only going to be specific for the buildings that have significant attic spaces. You wouldn't use this in a vaulted or cathedral ceiling style design, okay? But this is the most popular fan that we install, and it's the most beneficial bang for your buck for the people that don't necessarily have enough ridge vent. So we didn't really talk about this in your building's design. If you don't have enough ridge vent, what I've found is that the law of diminishing returns, where a ridge vent makes sense, is about a 20-foot cutoff. It might be closer to 18 feet, but 20 makes the math easier, okay? If you round up 18 NFA for the ridge vent and you go 20 times 20, it's 400 rough NFA. If you lower it down to the truth, like 380-ish, right, NFA for the ridge vent. So 20 feet is the cutoff, because those turtle vents that we were talking about that look like this, that are not active, they're passive, their standard NFA rating is about 38 NFA, right? So 38 of those standard turtle box vents times 10 of those box vents, the math means you do 380 NFA on the exhaust, okay? So if you're about 380 at 18 rough feet of ridge vent, that's the transition point where ridge vent goes to make sense versus the boxes. And so every building's architecture is different. You have to take into account all the different aspects of what's going on inside the building. You may have finished vaulted ceilings that are going to block things. You're not going to generally have too much lateral airflow in those situations. And so the ridge vent, for my ventilation detail folks that are considering that have enough ridge or is properly designed, or even in a cathedral ceiling, what we're trying to optimize for is that every bay in a cathedral ceiling has proper ventilation detail. But if it's going to have that full hip vibe where the gutter wraps all the way around, it's going to have a reduced amount of ridge. Back to the drawing. So you're going to have 20 feet in a full hip situation, the architecture, 20 feet's the cutoff when ridge vent makes sense. And you don't typically see more than 20 feet on too many full hip houses. If it has enough, it's going to be leaning more towards a ranch style where you'll have 50 plus feet of that, depending on the size of the house, all those different details. So the hip and ridge, the hips and we'll talk about hips too. Now we're going to be bouncing around. But there's some folks that believe that you can ventilate, and some manufacturers actually do provide it. I think it's the garbage way to do it. You can actually ventilate these hips. I think it's complete a risk. There's definitely some obvious opportunities for water intrusion there. I wouldn't recommend it. There's some manufacturers that don't, majority manufacturers that don't, because they believe it's a compromise in the roofing system. Plus, hot air rises. Why would you ventilate midway on the roof when air is literally just going to go to the top anyway? It doesn't make sense. So, okay, so quiet cools are the best, and there's benefits. It's not all just about temperature, okay? There's so many details to consider inside I'm trying to make this so you don't have to think about it as much, okay? The idea that someone believes a passive system is going to be better than a mechanical system could be right on the foundational basis that mechanical things break over time. But the true reality is these quiet cool devices are mechanical devices that will outperform any, when we have proper intake balancing the exhaust, any passive system, because you're literally putting energy in at a level that passive will never be able to touch. I believe that passive is probably the best ROI, most logical choice for most people, but for folks that have this situation in a full hip situation and they can't get a ridge vent, but they want to have that added benefit of optimizing their ventilation detail, throw some RVOs in there, balance it with enough of the Lemenko Smart Intake, and you can do a bigger RVO, a bigger turtle vent. You can go for a bigger 49 or a 60, and you can actually get increased exhaust flow. But those RVOs at the top of the roof that you see that your neighbors generally have, they look like these turtle vents, but they're not mechanical devices. Those are only preventing weather intrusion. They're not optimizing for airflow. There's nothing in the louver of the exterior shell of that exhaust that's actually promoting air to flow out of the attic space, if that makes sense. Whereas the ridge vent, back to those little baffles, has the actual design to help promote, using the Bernoulli equation, to low pressure, negative pressure, that promotes passive air to flow. It's promoting it versus the turtle box shells, tried and true classic for just preventing airflow or water from intruding to a building. Still a great option. Minimum viable solution for building code in the US. You wouldn't see too many buildings reaching a international standard of 1 to 150, which is a doubling of the ventilation detail, using RVOs. There are those that do it, but I'm not a fan because it increases or doubles the amount of penetrations required to get to that international standard, where you could achieve that with less penetrations and better protection with the ridge vent. So, good golly, what a long-winded explanation. And if you stuck through this is not a sponsored video. I am literally just trying to give you whoever you might be, the single strongest and still loosely held opinions on the state of the art of attic ventilation as it relates to flow roofing for the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest. These details will certainly not hold up in conditioned attic spaces or different regions around the United States. And so attic ventilation may also have come about because building envelopes, double, triple pane windows, and building wraps started to become better. Who knows? I'm not 100% sure. I was born in the 90s. So that's kind of a all-encompassing perspective that I think will catch people up to speed on the details that they should be considering around attic ventilation. And it's not to say this is a perfect explanation, but I feel like it's pretty comprehensive for the things that I believe that any property owner should be considering when it relates to roofing decisions, specifically with attic optimization for airflow, potentially upgrading current ventilation detail, or at a time when they're considering a replacement, that the flow of air should be a priority in the thought process of the roofs, and to change public opinion, contractors' perspective, that the best roofs are truly built from the inside out. So that's what I got. Thank you for joining the Flow Show. May the flow be with you, and we'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.